Hi there, and welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life, using real food, and we keep it real simple. And today we're gonna make a really easy recipe for bread, and this one doesn't use any yeast. So if you want to make some bread, you don't have any yeast in your pantry, or you just don't like working with yeast at all, then this recipe is for you. The first thing we're gonna do is peel and dice up a russet potato. Now this potato is about 9 to 10 ounces. We need a cup of mashed potato for this recipe. So any potato, probably 8 ounces or more, will be sufficient. If it's too big, then you're gonna measure out 1 cup of the mashed potatoes, and then you can mash up the rest for a little snack if you'd like. All right. Now, I have 2 cups of water here, and I'm gonna put that into the inner pot. It is important that you use 2 cups of water with this recipe. Not only does it change the time to pressure, which is cook time, it also will make sure that none of the pieces of potato get stuck to the bottom, okay? And you won't get that water notice. So 2 cups of water, don't skimp on that. You could use more if you wanted. That's no problem. It'll just take longer to come to pressure, but you're not gonna overcook your potato. It makes no difference because we're mashing it anyway, so you could certainly do that. All right, so I'm just gonna peel this up and I'm gonna dice it in about 1/4 to 1/2 inch dice. There we go. So I added it in, and I'm just gonna put the potatoes under the water, and we're gonna go ahead and put the pressure lid on. Turn the Ninja Foodi on. We wanna go to pressure, high is what we want. Take it down to 2 minutes and hit the start button. Make sure the valve in the back is to the seal position. We're gonna let it come under pressure. It's gonna take somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes, and then it'll cook for 2 minutes, and we'll do an immediate release. Drain it from the water and get the potatoes mashed up and the rest of our bread mix made. All right, there's the beep. So our 2 minutes is up. Now I'm just going to release the pressure. All right, the pin has dropped. We can open up the lid here. Do that away from you because it is steamy. And now I'm going to scoop it out. You could do this a couple of ways. I'm gonna go ahead and use my ricer, which is specifically for ricing potatoes, but you could certainly do this with a hand masher or an electric masher or even a fork. It'll be fine. I'm gonna go ahead and scoop it out here, some of the potatoes. Put them in my ricer here. Oh, and just squeeze it. I'm not going to worry about that little bit of liquid that went in there at first. I just didn't drain them well enough, I guess. All right, perfect. Now I'm just gonna let these cool off a little bit and see how much we have. Looks like we might have a little bit over a cup. So I will measure that out when we get it into our bread ingredients. But I'm just gonna let that cool over to the side while I start the rest of the ingredients. What I have here is 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I did not even sift it. Usually I do, but I didn't even do it for this recipe. It's not necessary. I have 4 teaspoons of baking powder. So I'm gonna add that in. That's gonna give the rise on our bread since we're not using yeast. I have 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Get a little thing here, get the rest out. So 1/2 teaspoon of fine grind sea salt. And you'll notice I have another bowl of flour over here. And that is because you start out with 3 cups, but you will add in a little bit extra. Anywhere from 1/4 cup to 3/4 of a cup you will need. Or you might even need the whole cup. We're gonna go by look here, and that is important when you're making this bread. All right, so let's see if this is cooled down enough, and we'll get it measured out. You know what? I think we're going to be right on the money here. If I can get this out. Now, I'll be honest with you. I don't usually measure it. I just kind of eyeball it. But that looks good. Okay, so we are right on the money with 1 cup. So my 10-ounce potato, or 9 to 10 ounce potato was perfect. All right, let's go ahead and add this in. And sort of mix it up. Now what's going to happen is you're going to get like little clumps, and that's okay. That's fine. We'll get rid of those in a little bit. But you want to mix in the potatoes to the point where the clumps are about the size of a pea. So right now they're pretty big. See that big clump of potato? So we're just going to keep going through this, stirring it until they break up into small little clumps. All right, so this looks good. So now the little clumps are really small, like little pebbles, little peas. So we're good to go. Now I want you to make a well in the middle here. So just bring out the flour mixture and just make a little well. And we're gonna crack 1 egg in there. All right, now I switch over to using a fork. I just think it's a little bit easier. And I'm just going to scramble that egg a little bit, mix it up, and bring in some of the flour ingredients there. And we're gonna add in the oil. This is 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And we're gonna add in our milk, which is 1 cup of whole milk. And just pour it in and bring in the rest of the flour. Pour that in. It's going to become a really wet batter, almost like if you were making like a cornbread batter or something like that. That's the consistency it's going to be, and that's why we need to add a little bit more flour so we get more of a bread consistency. All right, I'm going to switch over from my fork to this other utensil, so I could scrape the sides better. And just fold it over. Once all the flour has been combined, then you will start to add in your extra flour there, 1/4 cup at a time. It's important. Don't dump it all in. Your dough could become too dry. So I'm just going to measure out about 1/4. I'm not even being exact. Put that in. What I'm looking for is the consistency of a dough that I could knead a little bit. You don't have to do a lot of kneading, but I do a little bit so we can get it into the pan nice and smooth. So that's the texture I'm going for. That's 2/4 cups, so 1/2 cup total flour added. Looks like we're getting close, really. I think I'm going to stick with that right now. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some flour, probably maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons, and I'm going to take this dough out on the cutting board. And that way I'll get a better feel for the texture of it. All right, let's get that off there. And let's see how it is. All right, that feels pretty good actually. So I'm just kneading it a little bit. It should not be sticking too much to your fingers. If it is, bring in some more flour. All right, now is a great time to get the Ninja Foodi preheated. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the Tender Crisp lid down. We are going to select the bake roast function. 375 is what we want, and we want to preheat for 10 minutes. Now we're not going to bake at 375, but we are going to preheat at 375. That's going to get this the right temperature to start rising our bread, but we're going to bake it at a lower temperature so that we can cook it all the way through without over browning the top. And I'm seeing it stick a little bit here, so I'm just going to add just a tiny bit more. This is a really nice feeling dough, really. I mean, it feels like a yeast dough. It's pretty cool. And I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit more flour here. So I just knead this until it is no longer sticky. I have the right texture, which it is really nice right now. And then we will put it in our pan and we'll get it in to bake. All right, so we have a nice soft dough ball here, and I'm gonna get it into my Ninja Foodi loaf pan. Okay, this is available, I think it's available on Amazon, and I will link to it below, but it's also available on the Shark Ninja website. You can find it. It comes in the baking kit, or I think it's sold separately. It's a really nice pan, and I do use it a lot. All right, one thing I forgot to mention, I didn't show on camera, is I did empty the inner pot with the potatoes and the water. So I started with a clean pot before I started to preheat. I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And now that we have our dough that is soft but not sticky, we're gonna go ahead and put it into our pan. You don't need to do anything to the pan. Just put it in there, and then I press it down so that we have an even amount of dough getting into the edges. You want a flat top. All right, once it's pressed in there, the next thing you want to do is cut very deep slits. I found that using scissors for this, or if you have a lame, which is a special tool for making bread, that would work great, or a really sharp knife. But because we're going so deep, I find that my kitchen shears work really well. And you're gonna wanna make at least 3, but I usually do about 4 or so, maybe even 5. And what this does when you cut the slits is it allows the bread to rise up more evenly. So I'm gonna go down about 2 inches and cut. 2 inches, cut. 2 inches and cut. So I'm making 4. 4's good. All right, you can push those down, but I don't, because I think it just gives a little bit of a good look to the end result of the bread. Now I cover. You could cover with foil, or you could use one of these silicone covers. Either one's fine. All right, we have about 2 minutes left, so I'll let that time run out, and then I will decrease the temperature and get this into cook for 30 minutes. All right, so we've finished preheating, and we can go ahead and open up our Ninja Foodi and put our loaf pan in. We are gonna go back to the bake roast function, take the temperature down to 325 degrees, and we're gonna take the time up to 30 minutes and hit the start button, and we're gonna let the bread cook for 30 minutes, but we're not done. We got a couple things to do after the 30 minutes, and I will let you know what those are in just a minute. All right, so we're finishing up our first bake at 325 for 30 minutes. And when this finishes up, I will open up the Ninja Foodi, take off the cover, and then we will bake another 20 minutes at 325. All right, perfect. And let's pull off our cover here. It's gonna look real pale, don't worry about that. I'm also seeing that I didn't cut my slits deep enough or wide enough. So that's my fault. Don't worry about it. If you do the same thing, your bread just isn't gonna have a beautiful top to it. The previous test batches that I did were all perfect. They looked absolutely beautiful. But this one I see where it looks like it's torn here, and the little slits have pretty much all filled in. Do not worry about it. If you do the same thing that I did, it's still gonna be fantastic when we're done. All right, so now we're gonna go back on the bake roast. We want to go to 325 again. And we wanna go for 20 minutes. This is just gonna brown up the top and finish cooking the inside. After that's done, we're gonna brush a little butter on it, keep the Ninja Foodi off, and we're gonna let the bread sit in the Ninja Foodi with it turned off for another 20 minutes, and then we'll be able to bring it out and get it onto our cooling rack and cut it up and taste it. So we're finishing up the 20-minute cook, and I'm about to open up the lid. It smells so good in here. All right, let's see what it looks like. All right, it looks so beautiful, and it is nice and brown on top. It's perfect. It's risen up. Even though I messed up the top, it still looks beautiful. Now I'm going to talk for just a second, so while I do that, I'm going to lower this to keep that heat in. One of the challenges with baking in the Ninja Foodi is getting the bread or baked good done all the way through. So we manage that with time and temperature, like setting it at 325 instead of maybe 375 like you would do in the oven. The other thing we're going to do with this bread to make sure that it is completely done in the middle is we're going to let it sit and cool down in the Ninja Foodi with the lid closed. But before I do that, I like to brush mine with just a little bit of butter on top. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Is just take about a teaspoon of butter. This is totally optional. You do not have to do this, but I just like the way that it, I don't know, gives a little shine to the bread, and it just, I don't know, just adds another little dimension to it. Totally optional though. Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow. All right, that's it. Now I'm just gonna close the lid and let it go for 20 minutes. Then we'll get it out, get it onto our cooling rack, let it cool for a few more minutes, cut it and taste it. All right, so the bread's been sitting in the Ninja Foodi for about 20 minutes, and now we're gonna go ahead and get it out. Just put that out. Put that out on the cutting rack. Now you can let it cool in the pan, or you can take it out of the pan. I'm gonna go ahead and get it out of the pan. And I just want it to cool just another few minutes. I mean, this isn't even really necessary, but I like to do that just to be able to get a little bit more of a cut, an easier slice when I use my serrated knife. But look at that, it looks gorgeous. I mean, that is a nice loaf of bread. And again, I screwed up the top, not even worried about it. It adds character, right? When we make those kind of mistakes, it looks like looks like a homemade loaf of bread, and that's important too. So all right, so I'm just gonna let this cool just for a minute, and then I'm gonna actually I'll cut it straight down the middle so you can see the texture inside, because it's beautiful, it's light and fluffy, and it is so bread-like. It's amazing that this was made without yeast. All right, so I just grabbed a little bit of mayonnaise and a little bit of tomato out of the fridge. I don't have any lunch meat or even any sliced cheese, so I'm just gonna make a little tomato sandwich, which is one of my favorite things anyway, especially with a homegrown tomato. All right, the bread is still warm, but I'm gonna go ahead and slice it, and I'm gonna slice it right down the middle for you guys. Wow, look at that. This bread amazes me every single time. It blows me away that this was made without yeast, really. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and slice a thin slice here. So you can see, you can slice it for sandwiches. It is absolutely delicious that way. I would let it cool a little bit more. It's sort of on the warm side for a sandwich, but if you let it cool completely and slice it up, you can definitely make sandwiches with it. You could also toast it up. It is so good toasted. I absolutely love it. But I'm gonna go ahead and make up my sandwich, even though it's a little on the warm side. I should toast it, but I'm not gonna worry about that. All right, just a little bit of mayonnaise, which is probably gonna melt. A little bit of pepper. I would put salt, but I don't have any here, so I'm not gonna worry about it. A little bit of tomato. That in half. Oh gosh, so excited. Wow, that is so good. Now, it's gonna be a little denser than, let's say, French bread. So there is a difference in texture, but this is the closest I've ever tasted of a no yeast bread that tastes almost like a yeast bread. Oh, it's so delicious. You are gonna love this one. This is so delicious. It holds up so nicely. It's really easy to make. It takes a little bit of time, but no longer than a good yeast bread takes. But I hope you enjoy this one. If you really don't like working with yeast, this is your bread.